Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the 7 messaging mistakes that repel your high ticket prospects. This is for businesses doing over 50K a month who have a high ticket offer and a specific audience for that offer, but they might be dealing with unqualified prospects coming through their advertising funnel and have issues converting the individuals who are qualified. Now, if you don't already know me, my name is Dylan Wart. I'm the founder of Margin Maxing. We're a marketing firm that crafts cold traffic acquisition systems for high-ticket business owners so that they're profitable from the first dollar deployed. If you're interested in seeing what this means for your business, feel free to click the link below. It'll direct you to our website with more information. So the first mistake is just simply that your offer and messaging is signaling the wrong audience. So the words that you use in the packaging of your offer is usually the first filter for who pays attention and who comes through your funnel. So your prospect will assess credibility through your vocabulary, and this is unconscious and instant. Now, in regards to messaging, the mismatch doesn't have to be everywhere. It can be just at one seam. So, for example, if your ads are dialed in with the right messaging, but your landing page or your VSL or even your sales rep does not have the same type of language, you're going to lose some credibility. Or at the very least, you're just going to cause confusion. So congruency is absolutely necessary throughout your entire sales process. So we're going to get into that. So for the offer, the way that you go about your offer is entirely dependent on who you're serving. So there's 2 major types of audiences. There's the general public and there's a high ticket audience. So typically with the general public, they're looking for reasons to not buy your product or service. Their default way of thinking is skepticism. They tend to think that things are scams, especially if they're being advertised to them online. So in terms of your pricing, price will always create resistance. So you would need to price at the maximum level they can justify with your expected ROI. You should expect and adhere to payment plans, financing, and keep in mind that the general public usually tends to save rather than spend. So if they're making a purchase with you and it's a large purchase, it might actually be one of the biggest purchases that they've ever made in their life. So that's why you shouldn't expect upfront payments. Now with a high ticket audience, a higher price actually indicates quality. So it's the opposite, where you need to really look at your offer and everything that you're providing and make sure that you're not underpricing, because underpricing kills credibility. The specific audience in general usually looks for reasons to buy. They tend not to default to skepticism. Obviously, this depends on the person, but we're just talking at a high level general sense. But ultimately, a higher price creates trust, as long as you're a legitimate business and have everything to back that up. Now, I'm sure that you've seen a lot of advertisements, especially on paid advertising like Meta, Instagram, and Facebook ads. There's a lot of guarantees in people's messaging. And ultimately, this really just depends on who you're trying to target. And if you are using guarantees and you're targeting individuals for your high ticket offer, you might be actually shooting yourself in the foot, because ultimately guarantees are necessary for the general public. Because again, we're trying to overcome their natural distrust. And you need to make sure that you have ironclad refund policies, because you should expect to be giving refunds. You absolutely cannot guarantee results and not give a refund. Otherwise, you're going to have issues with the FTC and you're going to get chargebacks. Now, on the other side, if you're targeting high net worth individuals for your high ticket offer, guarantees are usually not needed. In fact, they might actually cause skepticism. Think of it like this. If you're a reputable business that offers a high ticket service, why do you need to offer a guarantee? There are other ways of creating your offer packaging to be more appealing to cold traffic, but in terms of guarantees, as long as you don't have any red flags in your sales language, your sales process, and again, you can show credibility and transparency, which we will also get into, you're not going to have issues with converting high ticket customers, and therefore you don't need a guarantee. In fact, anyone who has any experience in the business world knows that if you really wanted to, you could just file for bankruptcy if you don't deliver results. So at the end of the day, guarantees don't really mean much. So moving on to the offer structure. For the general public, you're going to want to create structured programs, courses, and group coaching. You want to create as much social proof and reinforcement as possible, even in your actual service, not just on the advertisement side. They typically need more hand-holding, step-by-step systems, where you lay every single thing out in very simple and basic language, and therefore the volume of your deliverables matter. So if you're selling to the general public, it's better to have a huge package of deliverables. Like for example, with a course, you would give access to the course, and then you would give access to a Slack channel with the community, and then you would give access to one-on-one coaching, and then you would also have weekly group coaching. So you're basically deliverable stacking, where you're giving them all these different ways of consuming your information and helping them absorb whatever it is that you're offering at a high volume. Now, on the other hand, if you're offering high-ticket services, the packaging of your offer has to be way more exclusive, way more high-touch, concierge-level access. It has to be done for you. It has to be a white glove experience. Your typical prospect is going to want a VIP experience where you offer everything, but in a way where you take care of everything. You don't have to guide them and hold their hand through the whole process of actually giving them that result. They just want it done. So therefore, quality is more important than quantity of deliverables. And now for the messaging and communication, your tone for the general public should be more empathetic, more aspirational, more emotional. It needs to appeal to their emotions. It needs to appeal to their desire to get out of a pain point, to get out of a painful situation, to transform. Now for your high-ticket offer and your high-ticket audience, a more direct, peer-level, and information-dense communication style is preferred. Now for handling skepticism or objections, this has to be extensive for the general public. Again, the default programming in their mind is that everything is a scam at baseline, so you're guilty until proven innocent. On the other hand, with a high-ticket audience, you don't need as much objection handling. These individuals are naturally more proactive if obviously there are no red flags. The process is more smooth. In fact, you don't want to use the same approach that you would use for the general public with your high-ticket audience, because again, this would create more friction than help. And finally, for trust signaling, obviously the general public needs immense social proof and testimonials. This goes back to having as many people as possible telling them that you are not a scam, that you deliver and that you deliver good results. Testimonials, case studies, all of these things are really important and highly converting. And on the other hand, with a high ticket offer, you should just focus on credentials, data, and transparency. You want to be as transparent as possible. You want to focus on the hard data so that you can help aid your prospect in making the decision themselves. They don't need to be told what's right. They just need to be given the information so that they can make their decision. Because at the end of the day, the people that you're targeting tend to be people who make decisions on a regular basis. Again, they don't need their hand to be held. They don't need a whole bunch of people telling them that this is the right decision. They make the decision themselves, and therefore you just provide all that data for them to make that decision. Now, with that all out of the way, because that was the biggest thing, once you have your offer and messaging down, everything else is more just about your sales process and your funnel. So let's talk about that. This is more technical stuff. So a huge mistake is not having selfless follow-up and therefore having selfish follow-up. So if your team is sending messages like, hey, did you see my last message? Hey, what happened? Got time for a call later? This is not communicating any sort of value and therefore just resorts to entitlement. The interaction that you're giving here is that you need a response from that person. So you need something from your prospect instead of finding ways to give them what they need, which in turn gives them a reason to engage with you in the first place. When a high-ticket prospect goes silent during this follow-up process, it actually doesn't usually mean that you have lost them. And that's a huge mistake. Thinking that as soon as they stop responding, you assume that you lost the lead. At the end of the day, these people are very busy. They might have just had something urgent demand their attention. They might have had a whole cascade of things just unfold where they have to deal with everything. Ultimately, you're just not a priority right now. And that's not necessarily a rejection, it's just a scheduling issue. And therefore, your follow-ups should always deliver value, because when they do see that message, they need a real reason to choose speaking with you over whatever else that they have going on. So you can do this through referencing the data that they sent through their application and connect it to a relevant insight. You could connect their situation with a recent client result and explain how that maps to their situation. You could give them an update on an organizational level that's relevant to the pain points and desires that they have indicated or that your offer indicates. And obviously this depends on your offer and who you're targeting, but in general, weeks, months, and even years of value-driven follow-up before an ideal prospect re-engages is usually normal. For example, if your offer is something that requires a big decision and a lot of commitment, but the payoff for you and your client is very large, having a system of following up with your prospect, if they check all the boxes over a span of months or years, can really pay off. Now, this kind of ties into mistake 2, but this completely has to do with communication in the way of which you're communicating. So the third mistake is that you're underutilizing texting. Depending on the prospect that you're targeting, they might not answer calls. And again, this ties back to the earlier mistake. If you conclude that means that they're unqualified, you're missing out on revenue. Because if you're not texting your prospects in the right way, you are losing deals, especially when you're selling to high net worth individuals. You have to remember that these people are very busy, they're very on the go, and they also make decisions really quickly, and they make them on their own. So you don't need to sit down with them and create a whole experience of a sales call in the way that you would normally have to do with the general public, because you're not trying to convince these people, you're trying to provide them with the information for them to make the decision. And therefore, texting is great. But don't text them from any number, because if you want credibility, you are going to need to, 1, send from a phone number that doesn't automatically get grouped in as spam, like normal CRM phone numbers or Twilio. And you also don't want to be using services that would send your message as a green bubble. You want the blue iMessage bubbles. At the end of the day, this is just standard practice. If you're using green bubbles, you're going to get less response rate. That's just what the data shows. This is just how humans are. High net worth individuals tend to use iPhones, and therefore, if you also use an iPhone or you use a service that sends blue text messages, you're just going to get a higher response rate. And on top of that, having personal, authentic communication rather than automated sequences, again, this ties back to giving them value, will greatly increase the amount of sales conversations that you have with these people. And a huge tactic to use is high quality selfie videos. We have a whole sales process that we give our clients for their sales team, specifically for these personal, authentic, and high quality touch points through texting. And a huge part of that is the high quality selfie videos. You want to make it as personalized as possible, because this ties back to the whole VIP exclusive experience, right? You want to be offering concierge level experience if you want these people to respond to you. Now, the fourth mistake is that your funnel has forced processes, and I'll get into what this means in a second. So high net worth individuals tend to dislike being forced through a prescribed sequence. They know how they make decisions, and whether they are right or not, they tend to believe that they're right in the way that they process information and come to conclusions. So you need to work with that, not against that, because ultimately they're just going to leave your page if you try to force them down a specific path of consuming information. So the moment that your funnel forces a rigid path, you're communicating that you don't respect their autonomy, which is something that high net worth individuals really value. So common violations of this in a call funnel, for example, which is the most common funnel that we build for our clients, is any sort of extra opt-in or process to receiving the information and the pitch about your service. So this can be a required opt-in before being able to view the video sales letter. This could be hiding the play bar or player controls, making it so that you have to watch the entire video sales letter in order to even submit an application. Being really anal about making sure that they watch the video and even putting a "did you watch the video" on the application form. And then obviously canceling calls or creating friction when prospects haven't watched the full video. At the end of the day, people are going to consume what they want to consume. And if you do not work with that and you instead work against that, they're just not going to consume anything, and they're just going to go on to the next thing. So the solution of this is giving them control. Remove every single gate. You don't want to control any part of their process when it comes to consuming your information and making a decision. So the number one thing you can do is having chapter titles on every educational video that you give them. And this has shown to give at least a 37% engagement increase. And what this means is, for example, on this very video, I have chapters that you can skim to. The reason I do this is because your needs are not the same as anyone else's needs. So you might only need one part of this video. You might just skim through this video just to see if it's even relevant to you. Now, you might think that this would lower the retention rate and the amount of information consumed, but this is actually not the case. It's actually the opposite. Data has shown that, for example, on a video sales letter on your landing page, If you have highly descriptive chapters at key points in your video that the prospect can scrub to, you will actually see a higher engagement rate because that person is able to scrub to the specific point that they want to look at to determine whether or not they even want to keep watching. And for those of them that are happy with that information, they will actually go back and watch more of the content. Data shows that people just bounce back and forth. It's not a straight line. Whether or not you think that it should be a straight line or not, it just isn't. So you just need to allow them to bounce around your video and get the information that they need. Because at the end of the day, the brain is a very limited instrument, and therefore every decision that we make, especially high ticket prospects that make high leverage decisions on a daily, they're always looking to be as efficient as possible with the information. And therefore, if you give them an option to only extract the information that they need, they're going to make a quick and accurate decision. Every unnecessary step in your process is a statement that you do not respect the prospect's time. Now, the fifth mistake is that your communication is too long. Again, this ties back to general audience versus high ticket. Just a very general benchmark for high ticket audiences in terms of your creatives. You don't want your video ads to be longer than 60 seconds unless you have a very unique or specific offer that needs more explaining. That's totally fine. But in general, keeping it from 30 to 60 seconds is optimal. Keeping primary text, ad copy, the communication through texts and emails just as concise, short, and value dense as possible. So all the information is the most necessary information. You just want to summarize everything and elaborate only when asked. You don't want to start with elaboration. Giving too much information is just going to cause confusion and delayed decision making. Be concise. Every line of text, copy, whatever it may be, has to serve exactly one purpose. It's either a credibility signal, an offer detail, or a call to action. Nothing else. Just cut out the fluff. Now, the sixth mistake is that you are withholding information to build intrigue. And again, this goes back to having transparency. Anything concealed is a red flag. Withholding information is an approach that you would take with general public, but it absolutely does not work with high net worth individuals, and it will not work with your ideal prospect for your high ticket offer. So the most common mistake is withholding price. So depending on your offer and therefore your audience, you want to be upfront about everything. The higher up your offer ticket is, the more transparent with your pricing and your system and everything has to be. Again, we're helping our prospects make a decision themselves. You're not trying to convince them or pull some sort of sales tactic on them. Another mistake is having only positive testimonials. When you do this, they automatically assume that you're hiding the downside. And what that does is it leads them to go try to find information about you on their own, whether that's on Reddit, Trustpilot, or even competitor content. And as you know, any reasonably successful business is always going to have bad reviews, whether they're real or fake. So it's better to give them the downsides up front, the real downsides, to really anchor in the expected experience with you and to build trust. And finally, vague outcomes. If your prospect can't evaluate the opportunity quickly, they're going to move on to the next thing. And the fix to this is excessive transparency. So in your advertising, you want to reveal your investment range, the minimum and maximum, exactly what the offer is, what happens next after they submit the form, the average results and typical timelines. That comes back to the credibility, the data, every single thing, all the information needed to make a decision. You want to create as many sales decks and presentation materials as possible. This is where you have case studies with specific outcomes, and you can pull from these case studies and send them a tailored result that's specific to their ideal situation or current situation. In some cases, you can even give backgrounds on your team. You can also give verifiable client references. But ultimately, just don't wait for them to ask for this specific stuff. Give them this type of information upfront. Again, you can wait to elaborate until they ask questions, but with the most important information, you have to give it upfront. Controlled honesty beats uncontrolled discovery. And finally, your funnel page might be cluttered. This just comes back to TMI, too much information. This is testimonial carousels, FAQ accordions, multiple CTAs, long form sales copy, and 12 sections of social proof. This works with the general public, but for high net worth individuals, and therefore your ideal prospects, this is either fluff or could actually signal a red flag. Again, with your ideal prospect, skepticism is situational, not dispositional. So if you don't have any red flags, there's no skepticism. Piling on more trust does not help. Again, this goes back to the beginning of the video where I talked about how less is more with the information that you give. And trying to stack objections or shoving social proof in their face is just going to turn them off rather than help them make a decision. So your funnel page should just be minimal. Headline, video, application, at the very least. You want the video to do the heavy lifting. That's why having a 10 out of 10 video sales letter is way better and way more important than a whole CRO optimized social proof stuffed landing page. The application qualifies the prospect, everything else is a distraction. So again, the principle is simplicity over sophistication with this specific demographic. If the service is good and the risk makes sense, your offer should sell itself. So here I've attached a quick audit. You can go through this. I'm leaving a link to this document below that you can check out. But basically it just helps you go through your entire offer and funnel and just make sure that you are following all the best practices to onboard your highest ticket clients. If you like this type of content and you want to see more of it, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.